So during the COLT meetings, when we were talking about what we should do for a reading group for next year, and we also were talking about the reading group for the spring, which, as you all know, is going to be distracted by Jim Lang. We also talked about the possibility of doing a podcast discussion group. One of the things that I've noticed a lot is that more and more colleges are putting together podcast discussion groups for a number of reasons. There may be some people who are interested in specific topics, but might not want to commit to reading a book, especially during these challenging times. And with a podcast discussion group, you could just meet and pick a podcast that everyone would listen to or read the transcript of, and then meet and discuss it. So it's a little less of a commitment, and it also offers a wider variety of topics that could be covered. I just shared with you in the chat. I think everyone has, well, let me just put it in there again, just to be sure. This is a link to a document with just a list of some of the podcasts that I listen to regularly, that I've subscribed to. Some of them haven't been very active recently. The Teach Better podcast is kind of going on hiatus. Most of the time, they'll come out with a new one that's offered by a couple of people who were at Cornell, one of whom is still down there. It's a really good podcast, but I think they've only had one episode in the last 7 or 8 months. But all the others are reasonably active. The UP Tech Talk one is good. It was really active for a while. It faded off. Times have been challenging. There may be others that you know. If you'd like, add them to the list. I put them in there basically in the order of their popularity. I was looking at some of the ratings and so forth. Actually, Leading Line one probably has moved up a bit since then. But the main question is this something we'd like to try? In the past, we had often done, well, before we started the podcast, we called them T for Teaching discussion groups, where we'd get together and discuss some specific topic, and we'd have a different one every month or so. We've backed away from that because we've been doing so much work on helping people transition, and because it's been a challenging year. But this could be an interesting replacement for that, where people in the group could submit a podcast or suggest a podcast, and we could just list that on the schedule, share it out with everyone, and then see who's interested in showing up to discuss it. So what do you all think? Is it worth trying?
I think it would be. I just was looking at, oh, sorry, go ahead, Naja.
No, you go ahead.
I was just looking at the 2 professors in the pod one, 2 profs in a pod, and that looked interesting too. So they look like they, all of these look like they would be cool to explore with this. Yeah.
I agree. I think it would be interesting to do.
Okay. So Casey, what do you think?
I think it's an interesting idea, and I think at some point we definitely need to try it. As you alluded to, John, my concern is there's still going to be a little too much happening and uncertainty going on this spring semester to throw another iron in the fire.
Yes. And that is a concern.
Now, I'll be honest, I don't know any of these podcasts, just because I haven't really been looking at them, been focused on a lot of other things. Yeah. One of the things I do wonder if this is a good way to maybe not pick one specific podcast for the semester.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting we pick one, that we pick an episode from one.
Right. And that's what I was thinking, is it's a way to maybe introduce folks to a lot of these by choosing an episode from different ones each time for the discussion, and folks can then settle in on the one that resonates most with them.
Well, I wasn't even thinking we would necessarily pick one podcast series, that we pick topics from specific ones,
Yep.
But yeah, it would have that effect that people might then decide to subscribe to some of these, and they're all quite good, I think. But I mean, I'm a little biased about some of them, but Teaching in Higher Ed is the biggest one. That's Bonnie Stachowiak. She's been doing this for about 8 or 9 years, and she's had over 2 million downloads. Hers is by far the most popular. Harvard EdCast is a little bit ahead of ours, but it's pretty close. They've been doing it for a few years longer. Topcast is one that specializes in online education. So it's the Teaching Online podcast, which is certainly relevant right now. And they were doing one a month. They bumped up to 2 a month. Leading Lines is from Derek Bruff at Vanderbilt, and he's had some really good guests there and some interesting topics.
I think if we're going to go forward with it during this coming spring semester, I would probably suggest we only do it once a month.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good starting point. If it turns out to be popular, we could bump it up maybe in the fall, but we could just try it, and it may be the case that 3 or 4 people show up one week, one topic, maybe we'd get 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 for others. I don't know.
Yep. So would we, pick one as a starting point, or how would we, start that process? Is that something you would do, John?
Well, what I was thinking is maybe we could put together, I was hoping we'd get more people for this. I was hoping we might put together a committee who could pick them. I'm probably not the best person to do it because, I'm already picking podcast topics for our podcast. But if we could get a few people or committee or group to, what I was hoping is we'd get a fairly regular group of people who each month or each time we met would listen to a podcast, but also bring ideas that could be discussed by everyone for the next meeting or something like that.
Would we want to send out like a call to see who's interested, and maybe like a survey to see what podcast people would want to start with or something like that?
What if we selected, like, there's 4 of us here, if we selected like the first podcast at least, and then sent the call out based on the topic?
Right. That's probably the easier way of doing it, because there are so many podcasts. I mean, Bonnie has like about 500 or 600 podcasts out there on the teaching and higher ed one. The Harvard Ed podcast has hundreds of them. We've got 171 of them. Ed Surge on Air has, there's so many out there, having it would be hard, I think, to have a broad net of people picking them at first. But if we could get a group of people meeting, they might bring suggestions each time for the next one. But I think we'd probably need to have some people or some subset of people pick a topic, for the first time. So would anyone like to volunteer to do that, or we could do it right now?
Yeah, I think like Naz just said, we could probably choose one now. And I was just kind of looking through.
So I was just skimming through the top cast, and this goes back to last June, but
yeah, they've been around longer. They've been around 5 or 6 years or so.
But I was thinking initially something sort of, adjusting to online teaching, which is why I jumped to Topcast, and then I hit this episode 68.
Do you want to?
I put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Getting everything current, a holistic approach to accessibility.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, which that's definitely, I'm doing like the 10-day accessibility challenge. So that would be a nice addition with what we've been doing with these winter breakout sessions.
So let me see.
Yeah, and they're not too bad. It's like 30 minutes, so it's not like it's a super long.
And if you listen to them at double speed, it's only 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Which maybe, and again, thinking like the reading groups, if people, rather listen, they can listen quicker, they may have more time, we may have, a larger audience possibly for podcasts. Maybe, we'll see.
But I'm open to whatever. That was just, as I said, I was thinking
So I just
from an online teaching standpoint.
Right. So I just put in the chat box a link, and it's not because of that podcast in particular, but because the most downloaded podcasts, looking at the 25 most downloaded based on the topics. So that can give us an idea of what most educators are interested in as well. And then looking for topics around the, around those that are that have been most downloaded last year.
Mm-hmm. And actually, the interview she did with Tom Tobin is, or, well, actually, either Michelle, I don't know, the Chad Littlefield one didn't strike me as being that good, but Todd Tobin or Michelle Miller were kind of interesting.
Yeah, episode 44 about how to create this culture between the asynchronous and synchronous, because I know some educators are struggling to have engagement during their synchronous classes. So that might be helpful for many who are, starting off the spring semester. How do you set the foundations for engagement?
Yeah.
And I also wondered along those same lines about the 5 ways to help students succeed in an online course. Holly Owens.
Which one is that?
Holly Owens.
Right on here.
Number 7 in the list, episode 22, 5 ways to help students succeed. I'm looking at that top 12 list.
Mm-hmm. One thing I could show is to give you a feel for some of the topics that from our podcast have been most popular, just in terms of ideas. Let me just hop over there for a second. We can look, because there were some topics that just dominated most of our others. Let me just pop in there for a second and look at because her podcast is fairly new, but but they're all good podcasts. But if we look here, one topic that just kind of jumps out is trauma-informed pedagogy with Karen Costa. If you notice, hers has been downloaded almost not quite 3 times, but like 2.5 times, over 2.5 times as much as any of the others. The issue of trauma-informed pedagogy is one that's also perhaps of a fair amount of interest.
So we're basically going to be discussing what has been addressed in those and recommend, and then also bring in some new information so we can compare maybe if there's anything in your podcast. Like I seen that 6 feet away one. I caught the title, said 6 feet socially distanced.
That was with Derek Ruff, where he was talking about I'm not sure that that's as relevant to us right now. Okay. It's a great podcast, and it's been used as a basis for discussion groups on at least 4 or 5 campuses. Karen Costa's was used in the entire University of California system online for their community colleges, at least. But Derek Bruff's was good. He was talking about the challenges of trying to teach in this sort of mixed environment where some people were face-to-face and some were remote, and trying to do active learning in that environment. And I think that was really relevant for us last year, but given that type of high flex type format has been strongly discouraged or banned effectively here, I'm not sure that would be quite as helpful. So the ideas we've got so far were the creating culture of connection in your synchronous and asynchronous online courses, the Topcast episode on a holistic approach to accessibility. And what else? I mean, we could, given the focus on accessibility and how many people are attending that, doing something on accessibility, I think, does make sense.
I would even combine the accessibility with creating that culture of connection between students with synchronous learning, because that's a challenge. Like I had a student that had a hearing impairment, and how do I ensure that I'm meeting all of her needs while teaching, right? Synchronously or during the in the hybrid courses. So even just wearing that transparent mask, making sure that I have a proper microphone and have the setting for the volume that's appropriate enough for her. So that's something to think about, is how do we inclusive engagement for a more effective culture, I guess.
Okay, so let me just see if I can grab some of these things. So this is one time, and we could do two of them. We could do that along with let me grab Casey's suggestion. The Topcast one, they'd relate to each other. Shall we? And this would be this is in the lecture breakers, and this one is in Topcast. And we could put in links to the individual episodes. Oh, is that the link to it?
Yes, John.
Excellent.
I'm working on the other one.
I do notice, I haven't really looked at her website before. I do notice that she doesn't seem to have a transcript, which makes the accessibility thing a little bit, oh, that's a connection thing.
Which one?
The Barbara Honeycutt's, the 44. I'm not
It
sure if they
does.
do.
If you scroll down,
Oh, is there?
it's basically below some of the ad and so forth, but there is a transcript.
Oh, there it is. Okay, good.
And there's a PDF transcript of
Excellent.
the accessibility one.
Which is certainly appropriate. Okay. So do you want to try doing that? Just share these out, pick a date. Maybe we pick a couple of times, to give people, maybe one on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one on Tuesday, Thursday. And we'll have to fit it around the reading groups and the writing groups and other things we've got scheduled. But shall we try this then?
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay. I think we have a plan.
Right.
And if people show up and enjoy it, we'll continue. If no one shows up, we'll stop. So
Sounds good.
Nothing wrong with trying new things.
Right.
And
then I was going to say, in our next COLT meeting too, we'll mention it, and people probably will be interested. So
we'll see. It requires less commitment than reading a book, and it's also lower cost because they're just out there and they're free.
Right. Awesome.
Okay.